I won the Fusion Gaming Open with Modern Merfolk. First place, took the whole thing down. Here's the deck list. And let's talk about it. All right, so the main new innovations are basically Mirror Reejery. We brought Reejery back. And for good reason, because I thought that it would be better than Lord of Atlantis versus Scam. Versus Scam, we don't even always have Island Walk, and also just even playing Spreading Seas is a bit of a liability. So I look back at like all the games that I have versus Scam, and I usually win because I have like enough, I just have a big pile of creatures. For one reason or another, they didn't kill them all. I top deck enough stuff, I can tap their stuff down, bounce their stuff, attack in for the win, so I just want as many creatures on the battlefield as possible, which means I'm going to want to have Tide Shaper. I used to side out Tide Shaper, I think that's a mistake now. And I don't want Spreading Seas because that just plays into Bowmaster. So I want to have as many... So if I'm going to have as many Lords as possible, I actually think Reejery is better than Lord of Atlantis because we cannot depend on Island Walk in that matchup, but we can depend. Like, I hate that I have like maybe a random Harbinger or Trickster or something on the battlefield, and there's a stupid Fury, like a 4/4 Fury blocking my way. Like they won't let me attack into it. But now if I just draw some like random Richton Dockhand, I can now tap down that Fury with like Reejery and then crash in for damage. So I liked that aspect of Mirror Reejery. I think that was very, very important. I can't depend on the Island Walk, but I can depend on tapping on my opponent's creatures down. But the next thing is that, like, I got this idea originally to play Reejery actually in Legacy. Let's take a look at my Legacy no Lord of Atlantis Merfolk list. I was trying to figure out how much could I push 3-drops in Legacy, because it was pretty clear to me that it was a very unexplored space. It's very clear we can play 4 True Name Nemesis. Okay, what if we play 4 Reejery? What if we play also like 4 Sfealoon? And then Hull Breachers on top of that. I think this list used to have even more 3-drops, and I've cut them. But the cool thing was that I could vial in like a Reejery on 3, and because of the new Flash Lord Hexcatcher, we could do some tricky stuff. So the deal is we now have more Flash creatures than ever before. Oops, no, this is the Fusion Open list. We have more Flash creatures than ever before with Merfolk, Trickster, and Vidalian Hexcatcher that we can now vial in on 3 our Mirror Reejery, play a random Flash creature at the end of our and this is especially at the end of our opponent's turn, like, because you can have nothing on the board. You vial in that Reejery, you play a Flash creature, you untap, then you like play either Sfealoon, another Reejery, copy your Reejery with Glasspool Mimic. That is a huge play. And then all of a sudden, your opponent that thought like, oh, you had a Grizzly Bear on the board, now you've got an army on the board going to your turn, and you can do like devastating plays. Every single creature that you cast can like tap down 2 things if you have 2 Reejerys. You could probably maybe even empty your hand, the rest of your hand, if you still have a bunch of 2-drops. So you can have these, you can set up super powerful plays, and I did very often start taking my vial up to 3. So it's less of a liability at 3, and especially when you have subtlety in your deck, you can also just much more comfortably take it from 3 to 4. And true to being as creature dense as possible versus Scam, I elected to have Harbinger the Tides in the main deck over, say, Dismember, just so that I have like a better answer to something like Grief or Fury. Like, Dismember is fine still, like those things, that still works, but it's just so relevant to have a creature, have something that can turn the game around. Like, you know, top decking Dismember is okay, but like, how do I win the game? All right, I killed their creature, the cost of 4 life, and already lost like probably 8 or so life from their stuff. Like, how do I turn around the game? So I wanted a pretty threat dense deck of creatures. That being said, okay, I just talked about like all these adjustments I did for Scam. I like online, I still got obliterated by Scam, as if it didn't matter. So I like went into this tournament like sort of half defeated. This is like the first time in a long time I didn't think I could win a tournament, and I just ended up winning the tournament. Any other relevant things to say? Okay, I think you can have the Richton Dockhands. I have them here because I didn't want Mistcaller, because I didn't want them getting sniped off by Bowmaster. Bowmaster just being played in so many different decks. Like, there's tons of decks. But you know what? It's only a 2 of. So I actually think that Mistcaller might still be the call. So I don't want to say anything like you have to play Dockhand or anything like that. That could be like Mistcaller can be like the one card in your deck that's like vulnerable to Bowmasters. Sideboard, you can go up and down these numbers. Like you can go up a Subtlety, down to Chalice of the Void if you want. You can go up or down. You can go like 2 more Spreading Seizes, 1 less Chalice, 1 less Dismember, 1 less Harbinger, whatever you want to do. But I would recommend actually changing out Spreading Seas after this tournament. Or I shouldn't say after the tournament. After playing more online, I would exchange Spreading Seas for Hurkyl's Recall just because Hardened Scales is just come back in such big force. And Spreading Seas' main purpose is to deal with Urza's Saga. And Hurkyl's Recall doesn't deal with Urza's Saga nearly as well because they will still get to tutor for the card that they want, which is very relevant in Hammer Time. So I can bounce the Constructs, which is fine, which is good, but it won't be as strong versus Hammer. Like, Hurkyl's Recall won't be as strong versus Hammer Time because they still got the hammer in their hand and they can redeploy it and try to kill you with it. The rest of the deck I'm pretty satisfied with. I will have to say, I went lower than like 10 islands. I went way lower. And the main reason is just desperation. Just desperation. Blood Moon be damned. You know what? Blood Moon be damned. And you know what? I will say, we need to keep the Ether Vial versus Rakdos Scam. That is going to be my strategy from here on forward. It worked great all weekend. It worked fantastic. The most important way to beat Scam is we have to drop these creatures on the battlefield. Sometimes they don't even have that much removal. They have like more removal post board, but their big removal makers are basically their elemental creatures. But Fury, you can play around Fury so much better if you have Ether Vial, because you can just drop as many lords as necessary to protect them, and also drop like Svelun as well. But just playing 1 creature a turn, that's just not going to get it done. So keeping Vial post board versus Scam is just going to be my go-to strategy from here on out. Anything specific? I don't know if I need the 4 Chalice of the Void in here, but it's there for like, you know, the Cascade decks mainly, basically. And I have a 4th Harbinger in here also for the Scam matchups. Okay, by the way, if you want a sideboard guide to this deck, I'll have a link to my Patreon in the description below. Also, there's a sideboard guide for everyone who is a patron or YouTube member, or on my other channels, though. And Twitch subscribers, that's right, the Twitch subscribers, because you have access to it in my private Discord. Okay, let's talk. Oh, did we talk about the... Here, let's just quickly take a look at how badly I beat this tournament. So many 2-0s, more 2-0s than ever before. Spoiler alert, I won the tournament. Yeah, so it's a bit surprising. Maybe this deck has more legs than I think. All right, so let's take a look at the matchups. Okay, round 1 was versus Creativity. A sensitive matchup because, like, okay, game 1, I mulliganed to 5, and it was a pretty crappy 5-card hand. It was like Harbinger, Trickster, Tide Shaper. I think it had a Cavern of Souls. I kept the hand because I don't want to go down to 4, and you know it had a slight. I mean, if I'm up against Murktide, against the right deck, this hand could have interacted well and won. But I was up against Creativity, and I got my head kicked in. My stupid Grizzly Bears were no match for my opponent's awesome removal and sheer power. But I did have a game in the next game where I was able to set up the Vial on 3, play the Regery, and then all of a sudden play my flash creatures, dump my hand, and then have a massive turn on my side. And then I don't know how that game finished off. They might have even comboed off with Creativity for 1, but it was like just completely pointless because my army was just too strong, and it just cracked in for lethal damage. But the third game I was on the ropes, actually. So I have these 2 Hex Catchers in play. So I'm only attacking for 4 power. I have 2 cards in hand. One's a Glasspool Mimic, one's a land. I'm in a really fragile spot. My opponent has Creativity, and they can play it for 5. Sorry, no. They can play it for 4. No. Yeah, they can play it for 4 with 1 mana up. So they have 5 lands in play. Point being is they can make me sack both my Hex Catchers, which was my only threat. It was my only power. Now, maybe from my opponent's perspective, they decided not to go for the play. If they went for the play, I might have been doomed. I don't know what's in their hand, by the way. They have a lot of cards, but maybe it's like 1 creativity and a bunch of lands, and they just could not go for it. But because they gave me another turn, I was able to glass pull copy my Hex Catchers. Can't remember what else I drew, but it was like enough power that I was able to get in for a lot of damage. My opponent never really got that creativity off. Maybe I even top deck a Force Negation, because I won that game, and I won that first match. And then, okay, next match, I'm up against Scam. Except I didn't see any of the Scam hands. In fact, I was mostly up against Dothy Voidwalker in both games. It felt like I was up, like, against Jund, basically. And for that reason, it wasn't nearly as dangerous as, like, a regular Scam matchup. And I was able to navigate that also to a victory. My favorite play was my opponent was attacking for lethal with a Dothy Voidwalker. I Violin Regery again. I cast a Merfolk Trickster. I use the Merfolk Trickster to untap a Svaelun in play. I then use my Trickster resolves. I then make the Dothy Voidwalker lose Shadow. I block with my Svaelun because that was the only thing that could block and live. And after that, I had like enough stuff on the board to crack in for victory the following turn. And I won both anyway, I won both games. One important note is that I won them both on the draw. Both on the draw. And I started to theorize like quite a bit ago that maybe being on the draw is an advantage versus Scam, because every single time you mulligan, I mean, that is just dangerous. If they have a grief hand, you're just stone dead. And they have extra cards, they have extra resources. So if they're on the play and they're pitching cards to grief, then they have way less resources than usual. But if you're on the draw, you have more resources. So keep that in mind. All right, next matchup. I'm up against Scam again. So I'm up against Scam. But this time, they got the best hand possible. They scam me. They go grief. They reanimate it. Comes back onto the battlefield, takes all my good cards, and they back it up with Ragavan and removal. Like dash in Ragavan, removal, dash in Ragavan, removal, and I was just stone dead. So going into game 2, I thought about what happened that last match. Because I think I won the die roll here, and I decided I'm going to take the draw. Which was a bit to my opponent's surprise, because they apparently made play draw dependent sideboarding, and which was really awkward now for them. It wasn't that big of a deal, but so I decided I'm taking the draw. And then this is what happened. They got grief turn 1 again, dash Ragavan, removal, and I was still dead. I had extra cards in hand. I did have the extra cards in hand, but they were all completely useless. Okay, so I lose horribly to Scam. But that will not be the end of Scam, because we get our revenge later. All right, the next round, I'm up against Burn. So I'm in the X1 bracket. Basically can't lose games for the rest of this tournament. We have to win out to make top 8. I don't remember much about this match, except my opponent told me, no pressure, but if you beat me, I don't have a girlfriend anymore. And I'm like, well, why not? Because girlfriends don't like losers. And the match was just, I mean, couldn't tell I thought this was a skit, but the entire time he's talking about how his girlfriend talks about or pays attention to all of his results and pays attention to, keeps track of all his wins and losses. And this is like the breaking point of his relationship at this tournament is, putting his whole entire relationship on the line. Anyway, I completely demolished him. It wasn't even close. I think there was a goblin guide that didn't get me a single land. Maybe that was the only thing I remember about this match. But outside of that, it didn't really matter. We just have so many good resources these days versus Burn. And that's that. Yeah, that's that. Anyway, poor guy doesn't have a girlfriend anymore, apparently. All right, next round, I'm up against what's called a Vivian of the Hunt combo. So it's this combo deck focused around Flamebound Accomplice, red 2 generic. It's a human wizard. It's a 1/3. It's pay a red. You may put a legendary. Sorry, you may put a planeswalker card from your hand onto the battlefield. Sack it at the beginning of the next end step. So you put Vivian of the Hunt. And then you go +2. You may sack a creature. If you do, search your library for a creature card with mana value equal to 1 plus the sack creature's mana value, put onto the battlefield, and shuffle. So you sack the Planebound Accomplice with your Vivian of the Hunt. And you go get Felidar Guardian, which can then blink your Vivian of the Hunt. Then you can sack the Felidar Guardian to go get, I don't know, there's some Reanimator creature. Anyway, it was a very interesting deck with Element. It uses Fury, uses Solitude. My biggest problem is I had no idea what the hell is in this deck. So we both mulliganed quite a bit in game 1. And that was to my advantage because my opponent was super far off their combo. And in game 2, there was like a little bit more happening. But from my perspective, it looked more like it looked like some sort of weird Omnath deck. Like, because I didn't really see a whole lot of the combo cards until like much later in the game 2. So from my perspective, it was like some sort of Solitude, Fury, Omnath deck, and I'm trying to play around Ephemerate and Removal and Leyline Binding, and it just didn't happen, and then I won. I think the only card I saw was Saheeli Rise, like, oh, and I thought it was just like another, I just thought it was an elemental deck that played Felidar Guardian, like, yeah, that makes sense. Blink your Fury, blink your Solitude, that's good value. But anyway, we win that one. The round 6, I'm up against Blue-White Hammer Time. Easy matchup. It's almost a bye at this point. The way I play the matchup, I almost hardly lose. And against Blue-White, I automatically had Island Walk sometimes, so I didn't even have to. Usually, my Spreading Seizes or my Tide Shapers, they have to go after Urza Sagas, which I did. And there was a time there's actually 2 Urza Sagas in play. One's at Chapter 2, one's at Chapter 1. I draw Tide Shaper. And my only biggest decision was which one of these things do I kill? If I go for the one on Chapter 2, my opponent doesn't tutor next turn, but they get to make a construct. And then they get to make 2 more constructs for the next 2 turns from the Urza Saga on Chapter 1. So what I end up doing is I end up blowing up this Urza Saga on Chapter 1, because then they only get 2 rounds of constructs, and I let them find their like Colossus Hammer, but I can't stop the tutoring thing anyway, and I was most concerned about the constructs. And I did have a Trickster to kill one of the constructs, but not a Trickster to kill the other one. But anyway, it didn't matter. I had an overwhelming board position. Well, our deck, if you look at our deck, like, we have so much for this matchup. We have Harbinger of the Tides, we have Trickster to tap things down. I don't like Force of Negation in the matchup. I mean, it's there if it's useful, but it's not necessary. Raidry is amazing in this matchup, because now all of a sudden you can tap stuff down with, you can double tap with Trickster, and you can tap stuff down with Hexcatcher, and you don't need Island Walk necessarily to get in damage if you have to. And of course, Tide Shaper blows up their Urza Saga, which is incredible. Which is absolutely incredible. So anyway, in game 1, it was like an Urza Saga fight, but I was able to fight through it. In game 2, they more or less got everything that they could possibly want in terms of, like, I had Stoneforge Mystic, they got a Colossus Hammer, they got a Pure Steel Paladin. They also got a Sword of Fire and Ice. They put it all on one creature, but I was already attacking for good chunks of damage, and I kept a Mutavault behind in order to block the creature with the Sword of Fire and Ice, because that would have been a ton of damage. I did not want to take that much damage. So we beat the Hammer player, and all I have to do is ID into the top 8, and boom! Yay! We make the top 8. It was easy draw, easy ID. Wasn't a clean top 8. Some people were fighting at the bottom, but my tiebreakers were incredible. Basically everyone that I played was like I played against a lot of people who made the top 8. So next match, I'm up against Blue-Red Scam. What is Blue-Red Scam? Like, it's basically, instead of Grief and Fury, we have Subtlety and Fury. And they blink it with stuff like Essence Flux, which is a blue instant. Exile target creature you control, then return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control. If it's a spirit, you put a counter on it. If it's not a spirit, who cares? You got a free Fury for crying. You're not gonna complain. So now here's the sweet thing about this top 8. It was particularly for this Scam deck and for my next matchup, it was open deck lists. Which, I mean, I'd have no idea how useful it was to my opponents. I should have asked. But for me, this was so valuable. I saw exactly the removal suite my opponent had in their deck. Exactly how many counter spells that they were running. I knew exactly what they had going that could potentially even come in from the sideboard. And it looked like, I mean, it looked like I had a big edge in this matchup. It's a blue matchup. Their only creatures are like Ragavan, Fury, Subtlety, and the Fury and Subtlety I can sort of deal with. I just had so Ragavan can be dangerous in a blue deck because they can cast my cards. So don't underestimate Ragavan in a blue-based deck like Murktide and like this Scam. But yeah, I could deal with it. But a lot of counter spells. Anyway, okay, so I knew what to play around, and I think there was only like Fire and Ice, and was there a Bolt? I want to say there wasn't a whole lot of removal. Like the removal was heavy on Fury, and there was like a lot of counter magic and that new the new Gandalf counterspell, 1 blue counter target creature with power toughness 2 or less. So the game could play out badly if they have a good Fury hand with Ragavan. The game could play out very easily if they've got like Subtlety and a bunch of counter spells. So game 1 played out really slow, really slow, like land pass, and I'm like, all right, I'll also go land pass. Like, I'm not gonna put anything in play if I don't have to. And at some point, I think a Ragavan hit the battlefield, and I start trickstering it, but I'm holding up like a bunch of lords to make sure that they all resolve. Most importantly, I've got Cavern of Souls in play. So I know all of the counter magic in this deck is getting completely bricked game 1, easily. And over time, we exchange a bunch of cards, but I'm just way up, and slowly stuff got pitched away. Like counterspells got pitched away to Subtlety, and I came out way on top. And I won game 1, and then going into game 2, my opponent just had a bunch of counter magic. Unfortunately, they drew a bunch of counter magic. I had Cavern of Souls, and I was able to play my cards like with impunity, and they could not do anything with their hand. And I was not blown out by Fury, or maybe a Fury was played, but they didn't have any blinkers. They had I think they had 6 blink effects in the deck, like 4 Essence Flux and then 2 Slip Out the Back. Didn't find any of them. So when they played Fury or Subtlety, they were literally 2-for-1ing themselves, which is great for me. So hey, we beat the Blue-Red Scam deck. Then I'm up against this Planebound Accomplice combo deck again. Now this time things are very different, because I find out this deck has no removal. This deck's not even playing Ephemerate. I do not care what this deck is doing. I just want to go all out and win. All I have to do is present the fastest possible clock, while maybe holding up Dismember post board. But like game 1, like I shouldn't be worried about anything. I mean, the most fearful hand I could think of is like my opponent has Planebound Accomplice already in hand, and they goldfish it to victory with like Utopia Sprawl. But outside of that, I can just like sort of ignore my opponent, because I know like they do have Fury, they do have Solitude, but if they use them, it will always be a 2-for-1 for them. And it's not even guaranteed that they have those in their hand. Although they can play, what was it called? There's that tutor in that deck. Aladamri's Call or something like that. It's the green-white instant speed end of turn, or instant tutor. Look for a creature, put into your hand. This deck played that. Anyway, yeah, won game 1 very easily. I think they mulliganed. Game 2, I think we both mulliganed a 5. Again, we both mulligan aggressively, but it favors me. Like, it favors me by a lot. And there is a moment where they go for the combo. They have the Planebound Accomplice. Oops, and they play Vivian of the Hunt. Let's get Vivian of the Hunt. On the Hunt. Vivian on the Hunt. They go +2. You may sack a creature. If you do, search your library for a creature card with mana value equal to 1 plus the sacrifice creature's mana value. Put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. So what ends up happening is I let them use Planebound Accomplice, get Vivian of the Hunt. They go +2, and in response, I dismember the Planebound Accomplice. They get nothing. And then they have to sacrifice the Vivian Hunt at the end of turn, and they had like basically no cards left, and it was over. It was effectively over. And then I was looking off to my right, and my opponent from round 3, playing Scam, won their semifinals match, and we're going to the finals. And I tell my opponent, this is going to be the easiest finals of your entire life. So I'm under no pressure at this point. I think this matchup is atrocious. I think it's awful. Anyway, I'm the lower seed. I don't win the die roll. Well, I'm the lower seed, so I go second, which is I'm happy with. I was happy with. My opponent knew I was also happy with this, and they go and again they got the scam hand. This is the 3rd time my opponent scams me. They go grief, turn 1, reanimate, and grief me again. And followed up with with Ragavan and removal. Except this time I've got an answer to this grief. We top deck the Harbinger of the Tides. And so finally I actually can bounce the stupid thing. Like, you do need to top deck well versus grief. Like, if you don't find an answer to this damn thing, like, it's gonna eat you up. So I believe this was, I believe it was the first game that I play Harbinger. And I do slow my opponent down at some point by, like, positioning a Sveloon and more creatures. I get myself into a point where, like, you know, I can double block this grief, which eventually I do. And then I'm able to go for the kill on the following turn with Island Walk. So I stabilized at a very, very low life total and was able to just clutch out game 1. Now game 2 is funny. Because, well, my opponent was not happy about all the punts that they made versus the Merfolk deck. They're a very experienced player, but they're sort of coming out of retirement, and so, you know, they haven't played against Hexcatcher or Sveloon a million times. They made like some, you know, sometimes they would shoot a creature with Bowmasters. Then I would counter it with Ward when they could have just shot my face. There was a time that, or let's take a look. There was a moment with Hexcatcher where they made an attack with a Ragavan. I was able to block with a 2/2 creature, play Hexcatcher. And then they tried to kill the Hexcatcher with the Terminate. And I just sacked like a random creature on the board to counter it. And they thought I had to sack the Hexcatcher. No, I could sacrifice any creature, including Hexcatcher. And also on top of that, I'm sure they could have played around this ability because they were shuffling 2 cards in their hand. I'm assuming one of them was a land. They just didn't know that they needed it. They could have just played a land, and then I would have had to have sacked 2 creatures in order to protect my Hexcatcher. And I think that was all. Those were the only big F-ups. I will say, throughout the entire tournament, like, people keep forgetting Tideshaper gets +1/+1 because they control an island. So people were constantly underrepresenting how much damage they thought they were getting, or underestimating how much damage they were taking from Tide Shaper. Online, it tells you the power and toughness. It corrects it for you, but in paper, it doesn't. It just says 1/1 on the card. And no, I don't have to kick it in order to get that +1/+1. If you just randomly have an island, then it gets +1/+1. So anyway, my opponent made enough punts in this game, and I was able to I was able to pull it through for game 2. It's been curious to know how this game plays out without the punts, because it was close, but I had like a pretty good board in the end. Instead of, it could have been like maybe a little bit more even. So it would have been an interesting game without the punting in the finals. But I'll take it. I'll take it. I don't care. It's a rare moment where playing my unusual Merfolk cards gets me some very minuscule edge. What to say about... Is there anything else I have to say about the deck? So anyway, I won. I won. This is the list that did it for me. I never thought that it would, but I guess it would. So did everything work out the way I thought it would? Yes. Regery is better than Lord of Atlantis, or the Island Walk Lords in general. You still want Island Walk Lords, so you still want 6 of them in the deck to pair up with Tide Shaper, just randomly kill your opponents, the ones that don't have Island, the decks that don't play islands. But also, I think Regery is just it's like an opposition almost. Like, that's how I'm looking at this card. It's like an opposition creature. You valid in play, and then all of a sudden you can tap, or you can tap your opponent's stuff, you can untap your stuff. Does some really cool trickery things. So I wouldn't change that. Force Negation, I mean, this could be Dismember, this could be Subtlety. I chose Force Negation because the most powerful decks are the ones that you're going to want Force Negation for. Like if I don't have this here, I don't feel very good versus like Living End or maybe the Crashing Footfall matchups, and maybe Tron or whatever. So I can live with I prefer to have the Force Negation in the main as an insurance policy. Yeah, that's it. All right, I hope you liked my story. I hope you liked the deck. I'll be playing with this type of variation going on in the future. Oh, and but one thing I want to say for anyone, or one thing I want to ask the community, for anyone who keeps their vials in post board, and it's so important. Like it helps so much versus all my scam opponents. Particularly in that finals. In fact, one of those games, I think it was the first game, I have like double vial hand, 3 lands, 2 creatures, I keep it, and my opponent, of course, scams both the creatures out of my hand. I just play my 2 vials and start playing my creatures at end of turn. It maximizes how well you, it maximizes how much you can play around Fury, but just makes it the most difficult for them to play any of their like sorcery speed stuff. You know, they can Thoughtseize into a like Thoughtseize. Okay, violent creature. All right, Thoughtseize bricks. Yeah. Oh, okay. But no. But now the point being, it's okay for everyone who plays Ether Vial post board versus Scam. How often do you win on the play, and how often do you win on the draw? I think that would be a really interesting data point to discover from all the Magic the Gathering online players. I personally will experiment with just exclusively taking the draw. All the games I won versus Scam that weekend, they were all on the draw. I had 1 more card than them. They had 1 less card than me. If they want to go turn 1 Grief, well, like if let's say you mulligan on a 5 card hand. 1 card needs to be a land. 1 card needs to be a Grief, 1 card needs to be a random black card, and 1 card needs to be the, like, Reanimator. So on a 5 card hand on the play, you just have 1 card left. So all you have to deal with is this one stupid Grief card. And hopefully that your opponent just doesn't have that much backup. Or you force the Scam player to top deck the backup. So Merfolk's still alive! In a tournament I didn't think I could win, I won it. There we go. All right, I hope you give it a thumbs up. I hope you enjoyed my little story here. All right, we'll have gameplay of something very similar to this. Oh, just this thing coming soon. So keep your eyes peeled out for that. But until then, this has been Nikachu, Merfolk Master, still winning with Merfolk in 2023.